I think Series 8 stays in my memory as my fave series to make.
Whoops! You've been critered!
We'd obviously shifted right back to the beginning. You think you can buy me with promises of power and glory? Do you really think, OK, I'll do it?
It was like the first day of filming, right all the way, all those years ago in Manchester, you know.
An epic, a Ben-Hur of Red Dwarfs.
I have to say, it was the most fun series to make.
It felt like it was all the best bits. All the best bits were there.
You had, like, Chris back. Where did he go? What's all that for? Where did you go, Chris?
We'd been through the mill, you know, and somehow that we'd found a kind of settlement. Doug had written all these episodes with Paul Alexander helping, but I mean, it was basically, it was sort of, I don't know, it was just distilled. It was distilled Dwarf.
Chris had been away for a while, and he was back, and I'd been away for a really long while, and you know, there's just a feeling of freshness and excitement and vigor, and the feeling that we could do anything. Oh, wait a minute, that was the 60s in America.
When you've created something and you've kind of lived with it for so long, it must be really, really hard turning it over to other people. And I think Doug really, really wanted to be even more involved with Series 8.
We had those great bunk scenes again, you know, where we'd have those conversations in the bunk, which I used to love about the first couple of series of Red Dwarf, those long, rambling bunk scenes where we just talk bollocks for ages, and it was just funny, you know.
Both cheeks, man. She nearly wore them down to the bone. Will you shut up?
First of all, Red Dwarf was a bit of a double act, you know. Robert and Danny were just bit part players, really. They should have stayed that way.
When Chris and Craig fell out and they found it difficult to work together, it became very, very difficult to write bunk scenes, because rehearsing bunk scenes with just the two of them was just kind of gruesome, very strained and not much fun. And so we didn't do bunk scenes anymore. We did gang scenes, and it was then much easier to rehearse them and do the gang scenes with everyone chipping in one-liners and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, I mean, I think we explored the Rimmer Lister vibe as well in Series 8 as we ever did in any series.
It's like a football team when, you know, you got a guy that's off injured. You know, you always got substitutes, good footballers, you know, but it's not like having your first team out there, you know.
Coming back to Red Dwarf was an easy decision to make, because I knew by that point that there was never, ever going to be in my life again a set of scripts that you look at and that you always laugh.
Chris was, yeah, a new man. He'd shrugged off all his frustrations about the way the series was shot, and in fact he was complaining about how quickly Britis was shot and how they didn't do the retakes and didn't have the care and the loving, you know, of reshooting endlessly and keeping people hanging around.
The moments I remember of that is the kind of first read-through when suddenly we're all back in the same room going, oh, brilliant, oh, this is good, you know. I like these people, this is good fun, you know, because there's all that, you know, I think that thing happens where you've got to arrange your whole life, and I had little children then, and it's like, oh my God, I've got to be there, and, oh, how do I do that, and I've got to, can you hold the kids, porridge, quick, you know, wipe the table, and then you suddenly go there and you go, oh, it's this, oh, this is good, I like doing this.
There's no such thing as a brown alert, sir. You won't be saying that in a minute, and don't start in alert. All the affairs on the screen.
Coming back in Series 8 was great. It was, yeah, it was nice to be back again.
Norman Lovett and Mac McDonald were the two sort of old war horses of the alternative comedy scene that I first got involved with in the late 70s, early 80s. And Mac was one of the first people I ever worked with. Norman I'd known for years. So it's kind of, they were sort of like a couple of old mates to sort of sit around with and moan.
I'd like to have been more involved, hand on my heart, like in the early days of having a really good scene like He's Dead Dave, or We're on the Dog's Milk, you know, all that sort of stuff, or playing chess with Gordon and all that sort of stuff. I'd like to have done more.
He's moaning already. He's moaning about being brought back.
Yeah, he popped up occasionally to just entertain you with a little gag here and there. I've discovered stuff in there that'll make your hair stand on end.
What stuff?
Brill cream, it's called. The material was all crowbarred in. Oh, let's put a Holly gag in. Norman's here, we might as well use him.
Norman love it. With ginger hair. He dyed his hair, right. Because he looked in the mirror and thought, well, I don't look like the Holly. Because he was only in series 1 and 2. So that's a long time ago. So Norman, he'd lost a bit more. And he thought he'd darken it. But it went kind of ginger.
Walked into the studio one day, and Andrea, the makeup lady, came up and said, have you seen Norman? He's got Man United red hair. So he's dragged off. Andrea comes back. She said, we're going to do our best. We're going to do our best. We're going to put a new dye on it, and hopefully we'll get it back to where it was before. She comes back. We put the new dye on it. It's not gone well. What do you mean? It's now green. Finally, they got it to sort of an orangey, gingery kind of thing. And then they had to light it and all the rest of it. So you can have problems with... He's only got like 12 hairs, you know? The trouble those 12 hairs cost us. Unbelievable.
When I played Holly originally, I think I was 41 or something. Quite good. Nothing's moved round here. It's all toned. And Ed Bye actually said to me, you know, something about that, which I thought was very nice of him, you know. Thank you, Ed. I hope your jowls are hanging low.
With Hattie, she would wear a black surgical collar because it kept your neck and head absolutely straight and you couldn't move. And we did that with Norman, but he found, you know, it got very... He was too restrictive. So there were various things tried, and I think we ended up with a black painted-on makeup neck, which just, you know, disappeared.
It's almost like plastic surgery, isn't it? Make yourself have a nice chin line and cheek line. So they did, they painted it on, you know. But I don't know what sort of stuff they put on, but it took ages to take off in the bath, and it all went red and raw. But I was prepared to suffer for my role.
Mr. Thornton, read them their rights.
The last I had to do with Red Dwarf before Series 8 was Series 2. I'd always hoped that I would be brought back, and if ever you can get brought back in a series, Red Dwarf is a series that you can get brought back in. And one day, the phone rang, and it was somebody who was trying to order Chinese food. But later that day, the phone rang, and it was my agent saying they're doing the 8th series of Red Dwarf, and they want you to be in a number of episodes of it. I said, forget it, man, I'm busy.
To abandon you at the bottom of this lunar sea in the depths of deep space. Oh, is it? Oh, I see it. 24.
How much changes in 7 years?
You remember?
Mac is just so funny. I just love Matt. Oh, you know, he's a terrific actor. Great.
Mac McDonald just cracks me up. Whatever he's in, I'm always laughing. And because most of the scenes with him in, I wasn't in. You know, there was a lot of those, all those scenes where they go and see the, you know, he just makes me laugh. He's just a funny bloke.
You did wonder what he'd been doing, having left Red Dwarf. You'd seen him in all these films, Captain Hollister, Mac. But you kind of soon realised that mainly he'd just been eating. And Doug, being the heartless bastard that he is, then turns that into his personality trait. Donut boy. And you're like, Doug, you can't do this. You did tell me once before, though, you do respect him, don't you?
Respect him? A man whose family crest is made up of 2 cream buns and a profiterole? A man whose idea of a light snack is standing behind me, isn't he?
Yes, he is.
I don't know how Doug gets away with it, and I don't know how the people reading it don't go and lamp him one. Do you know what I mean?
You can't ignore it. You have to explain why, you know, the captain of a ship is the captain of the ship if it doesn't look credible.
If the crew discover I'm really just Dennis the Donut Boy, I'm finished.
So I was thrilled with the Donut Boy idea, because that just really seemed to make sense to me. That in fact he was actually much more like them than we ever first thought.
I had this backstory of how Hollister came up through the ranks in the academy and all this stuff and became like captain of the Red Dwarf, which had to change radically because we find out that he just sneaked his way into being captain, which is much more interesting, I think, funnier.
Guys, we got a problem.
I wanted to have a new format. I was always intrigued, even when we wrote the pilot, of what would have happened if everyone hadn't died.
And again, it's the series spinning off in a completely, almost reinventing the entire format for the series, which is something that I think Red Dwarf has been great at doing. It's never got stuck. You know how kind of Men Behaving Badly kind of got a bit stuck, so that by the time the series ended, there were these two 40-year-olds behaving like students, and it just felt slightly wrong. And that's never happened with Red Dwarf. It's always kind of grown up with its cast.
Paul, he was really tenacious and very happy to keep going, and that's what you need.
But we were bringing back characters that had existed in a previous existence. Now, really, the question was it going to make more sense to have something completely new design, you know, and then have the thing, but you've got the same person? Or was it safer to go back to a semblance of what they wore before? And so that from an audience point of view, you'd sort of recognise, you know, immediately, oh, that's what the uniform was.
Also, the fact that it was back on Red Dwarf psychologically had it was a big plus thing for the cast. You know, they all really had enjoyed working on Red Dwarf, and it seemed actually so much bigger than being on Starbug, which always seemed to be quite cramped.
The big difference between season 8 and season 7 was I stopped taking advice from the people I'd been taking advice from. And it was a bit of a struggle, actually, to go, we're having the audience back. That wasn't as easy to implement as maybe people think.
Series 7 was very successful, and we showed it to an audience, having shot it, and got their genuine, you know, reaction. And that was fine. But one of the things that we missed, Doug in particular missed, was the interaction between performer and audience, which is not something you can tangibly put on the screen, but it's something that happens.
You showered the girls.
Oh, so hideously dull, I can't describe it. As they stand around soaping themselves, their bodies all wet and foamy.
I'd love to think that it was the incredible insight of the cast to say, I really think we should have the audience back because we'll be betterer. I don't think it was anything to do with that, but I mean, certainly we were very supportive of that idea, because it does make it harder to do. I mean, from the point of view of everybody else, you know, to have to shoot in front of an audience makes life much more complicated.
When they hear the laughter from the audience, they know, oh, that was funny. And they can milk situations because it's like constantly getting feedback of, yeah, that's really funny, and equally, no, that's really boring.
You do perform slightly differently. When you're with an audience, you just take it up that level because of the sort of adrenaline of having the vaudevillian kind of adrenaline of having to entertain the masses in the room with you. So it just becomes slightly bigger and slightly more energetic, I guess.
You know, you do it in front of a live audience. It's a bit like taking an exam. You know, you got one. You know, are you funny? You got one chance to get it right, and then if you haven't, the audience have seen the gags. The second laugh's not as big, you know.
And it's something that we've been used to, obviously, with Red Dwarf over the years. And having done the kind of filmic version, we thought, right, now we can create a hybrid. We can do a audience show that still has the production value and the look of Series 7 as much as we can.
I'd never done a live studio audience before. We rehearsed and we did shoot 2 days of it on film. Then Friday night was the big night.
We had full houses every Friday night, and it was wonderful. It was a really good atmosphere, a good environment, and I think it probably did help the cast, you know, really up their performances.
The other boys, I mean, they do stand up. They were very relaxed about it, and I was terrified.
And there were kind of key moments in that series where we got really big laughs, and you just had to ride that laugh. And that was, you know, that's what we'd learnt, you know, 20 years knocking around on stage. You know, that's that kind of, yes, you don't shout over the laugh. You let them laugh. Bring it on.
I've never got praised for screwing up before. Every time I muffed up, they were laughing. It was like, oh, this is so cool.
Yeah, we need a live audience, I think. Well, an audience. I hate saying live audience. Well, a dead audience. You know, bloody hell. Oh, well, there have been dead audiences, haven't there? You know, I've played in front of some.
Guys, this is brilliant! I can't believe it!
You know these people, sir?
Of course I know them. They're in EastEnders.
We got the old EastEnders crowd back again, didn't we? You know, my two mates, Chen and Selby. who'd gone from series 1 of Red Dwarf to both star in EastEnders for years.
I mean, it's an excuse, really, to go back to the characters that we liked right at the beginning.
The airlock door swings open, they stagger out and run towards the camera as the cockpit blows up behind them, throwing them to the ground. The sound of guns being cocked, the posse look up. Several men in masks loom over them, they pull off their masks, Selby and possibly McHale, somebody else from episode 1, stand there amongst the others.
We were killed off in the second episode. And we went to Paul Jackson and Ed Byers and said, is that it? You know, we are now officially dead. And they said, no, don't you worry, we're going to bring you guys back. And we said, well, how can you do that? They said, well, there's all sorts of things like space gas, time tunnels. You leave it to us, we'll do that. But be ready, wait for the phone call because you'll be coming back. 11 years later, the phone rang. Yes, I was surprised.
Selby? Jed? Is it really you?
Is it really us? Hang on, I'll check. Yeah, I think it's us.
I was originally up for the part of Lister, but it wasn't to be. It was Craig's part. Craig did it. And you do tend to look back thinking, if only, what would have happened, you know? What would have happened? I wouldn't have had the career I've had and done all the jobs I've enjoyed doing. But you do tend to think back, yeah, nice part. Would have liked that.
What's the book?
Gideon's Bible.
He follows me everywhere, that bloke. I was staying in a hotel once. He left his Bible behind there as well. Then 2 years later, another hotel, Dozy Git left it behind again.
I did like them bunk scenes. I can't express it much. It was like me and Chris going back to the old days, and there was some of the old vibe there as well.
It gave us the opportunity to recapture something that a lot of fans have said is one of the strong points of the original Red Dwarfs.
You're in there. Words out, they're going to throw the book at you, Listy. Followed by the bookcase, and then the library, brick by brick.
The place where we filmed the crash sequence in the tank was a classic Red Dwarf location, which was a sewage pumping station in the Isle of Dogs. And it was, even on a lovely sunny warm day, this place was cold, smelly and damp. It's actually not a sewage pumping station, it's a flood relief pumping station. It can pump out the Thames. So it was big. And it was, and it was a little building in the middle of a roundabout. Nothing at all grand, looked like someone's bungalow. But when you went inside, there was a pit inside it that went down, I think, 10 or 15 floors. I mean, it was scary looking over the edge. And I think they assured us it wouldn't start up and it wouldn't fill with water, because I was quite nervous. Ed, you sure it won't fill up with water all of a sudden?
I don't think you can just go, oh, well, let's put Starbug in the old Starbug garage. If it's going to go, it's got to go. And so he thought, yeah, it needs to be smashed in a million pieces. Then it definitely says, OK, we're off Starbug now. We ain't going back there.
When it came to actually blowing the Starbug up, we used rubber dust. Rubber dust gives nice big fireballs, and it's pretty instant. There is no great heat generated, because if you're building things from plastic, you don't want them to melt halfway through the take. So all you do is ignite the rubber dust, and then you go in with a vacuum cleaner and vacuum all the burnt dust up, and you're ready to go again.
And it was one of those other ones where when you read, that was often the case when we read the script. That was the kind of like us seeing the episode. And I remember that one being very funny, and also going, you're not really going to, how are you going to do the thing with the rat? How do you do that? Have you got real rat? Won't people get upset if you hurt a rat?
I was very keen to get a real rat specimen to examine, principally for textures and just to see the way it moved as much as I could. We actually brought this, I think it was 1 or 2 rats into the production office, and proceeded to get them out onto the desk, and they were kind of crawling around on the keyboards of the computers there, and I was trying to take photographs. Unfortunately, we didn't know at the time was that when rats get quite stressed and in an unusual environment, well, the rat was relieving itself everywhere, shall we say.
Nearly finished, sir. It's my very special, extra-long salute I reserve for the especially important, sir.
That grew from rehearsal. It had started out much shorter, I think, than it finally ended up. And it really creased me up.
Constantly in rehearsals, it was Chris, make the salute longer, more elaborate, crazier, more, longer, more, longer. No, even longer than that. No longer than that. More, longer, more, longer. And Chris would do it a bit longer each time, but not really the whole kit and caboodle. And I was like, oh, this is so frustrating. And then on the night, for the first time ever, maybe it was because he was saving it, maybe it was because he was kind of almost cheered on by the reaction of the audience, that he really went for the whole thing, which was absolutely brilliant. I stood up and cheered at the end of that sequence. It's one of my favourite Red Dwarf bits ever.
But the audience, of course, for any comedy actor, that is just a gift, because you can play it with laughs. You can sort of start off doing the salute, that's the 5, and then you can just keep going, because the audience is saying, oh, how long is he going to go on for here? You know, and then you can start doing some different things with it, and then you can just start going absolutely, completely mad with it until they completely stop laughing. And then you can take that bold step of going, well, I'm just going to keep going here. Keep going more and more with the salute until they start laughing again. And I think in Rimmer's mind, it's a question of the longer the salute, the more whoever he's saluting will appreciate it, which of course is a silly way of thinking about it.
Can you tell me when you were created? Can you remember?
2340, sir.
Very good. 2340. Now that's in the future, isn't it?
Yes, sir. I was created after you died.
Lovely.
It was that thing where, you know, all those previous episodes and that weird world you'd been in, suddenly you were with the bloke that was like, you're all mad. What do you mean you've been through? What do you mean you shrunk Red Dwarf? You're daft. Where have you been? Where have you been for the last 2 million years? You know, this is normal here. Yes. Oh, yes, we're recreated by nanobots. Yes, all right.
Chloe played that really well, I thought. Do you know what I mean? For 1 minute, I actually thought, hey, she fancies me. But she was only acting.
It's a lads' crew, it's a lads' cast. I'm a sitting duck, aren't I?
And there was the man with all the piercings.
Oh, Roger. Oh, nice.
John Lynch, who was an ex-bank manager. He'd retired and wanted to break the Guinness Book of Records of facial piercings, I think.
Well, you've got to have a hobby, kid, but what's wrong with fishing?
All your prejudices are always thrown in your face in those circumstances, because you assume that someone who has, I don't know how many, 48 facial piercings, is going to have a sort of, you know, he's going to grunt and go, what? And he was terribly well-spoken, retired bank manager.
Imagine going into your bank and asking him for a loan. You'd think, nah, I'll leave it. You know, it's all right. No, you wouldn't get behind on your payments, would you?
I mean, he had some piercings that he wanted to show us that even Craig didn't want to look at. But he showed us.
Oh, my God, you are sexy. So very, very sexy.
Hey, let's face it, most of the time he is the butt of the jokes and nothing ever goes right for him. So to have the sexual magnetism virus was quite fun, really. I can't remember who I got to kiss, but I'm sure it was some lovely people.
No time to lose. You should head for the nearest one of these. Now, at the time, I was really annoyed about that when Doug said, you're going to, you know, we'll use your bald head as a joke. I thought, oh, yeah, well done. Well, Doug's bald anyway, not as bald as me, but he's going fast. Good. And at first, I thought, oh, yeah, bald moon. But now, I must say, I watched that recently, and I think it's a good joke. It's a good joke, and it works well, it's funny. So, great. Well done, Doug. And well done, my head, for playing the part.
What do you guys do?
Computer programmers.
The teeth, well, we had to go into Chelsea to have them fitted beautifully. Go back for several fittings, and these are made because they're all fit to your mouth. I mean, they cost a fortune. They're porcelain. They're beautiful. You know, you'd almost want. Well, no, actually, you wouldn't want to wear them.
We never got to keep the teeth, you know. Who else is going to use them? Someone's got them teeth somewhere, and we're not allowed to have them. Who else is going to use them? They're made for my mouth.
And it just automatically makes you, you know, talk like a divly.
was, again, storyboarded. Close work with Chris Veal to work out what we're going to do. The whole story concept's there. Then it's choreographed with Danny and a choreographer, and then tweaked by Doug and then myself.
Utter hell. So difficult to do on so many levels.
It took an awful lot of planning. When you watch the show, it feels like a very short sequence, but it really took months of planning to do.
The original music was actually going to be like a big band thing, you know, and it was really quite swinging, the original demo.
Everyone likes different music, and often people forget this is about what serves the story rather than what's your favourite music. So there's a kind of, I want to do this kind of, I want to do that.
Then it was changed to something else that I didn't think was quite right. I was a bit too far away that time, sorry, buddy.
And he didn't like any music, so he did it all to a click track. So it's just, and he's doing the dance to this.
Clem Ishmael was brought in to do the music, and Charles Orgins of Queeg fame and Tongue Tied fame was brought in to choreograph the number again.
I think it's better the way you just did it the first time, and do this as one. Look at this.
You know.
But then after that, it's simply a three-way conversation between myself, Danny, and Peter Morgan.
Yet again, shot on green. You know, eye lines literally was a nightmare, you know, trying to see where you're looking, you know, dancing with a giant flying machine.
At that point, we decided to actually put in a second dancer who would represent the Blue Midget, who Danny would dance with.
And I do remember when we were shooting this, we were about 2/3 of the way through it, and I looked around and the bewildered crew were just looking at us going, they had absolutely no idea what we were doing. But it's not something you can just come and introduce something at the last minute. And then I do remember when we were just about to start, Doug came in and said, I think you need to do some low-angle shots on this. And I went, right. I wonder how we're going to do that then.
We used a model for the cargo bay, which you can actually see in the opening sequence in Back in the Red. It's where the Starbug crashes. And that was the same model we used to shoot background plates where the dance sequence takes place.
Every angle had to be covered. Each time we'd move the camera, we'd be shooting off the model, so I had to go in and add another wall. Essentially,
I just put the Blue Midget model into the sequence with the animation on it, and we touched it up here and there with nice lens flares and things like that, and I think it's one of the best sequences in Series 8. I'm really pleased with it.
I think I'm right in saying there was a point where I just didn't go there on the internet anymore to see what the fans thought, but certainly my initial findings were that they absolutely despised the Blue Midget dance. I mean, I thought it would be a terrific set piece for Danny and Chris Veal, and I thought it would be something that, you know, you don't see every day on British telly. And also, it was part of the story. I think it's certainly true to say that it sits much better in the full show. Because you lose sight of how it fits in when you view the show separately.
This is a diary of Captain F. Hollister of the mining ship Red Dwarf. Several of my crew are presently being tried for crimes against the Space Corps.
I was kind of disappointed that Back in the Red was not a 1-hour special.
The fact that it was cut up, I don't think did it any favours, really.
We didn't realise, actually, the effect that it would have on the show, cutting it up into segments. We thought if it was recapped, it would still hang together, but I think there is a definite benefit from seeing it all in one slab.
Doug Naylor can't write 30-minute scripts, you know. I mean, because that, what, Back in the Red, was it? It came in like the Yellow Pages, you know. like a telephone directory from A to Z. It was like so thick.
Doug kept on writing and writing more and more great ideas, and so it extended, and they had to chop it up into 3 parts in the end.
It was like, we're not going to get this done in half an hour, and Doug's going, really? Page 180.
It ran so much longer because it was funny, and people laughed, and that took longer to do than if you just read the script flat.
I think it was going to be an hour, then it wasn't going to be an hour, but we'd already shot and got so much in that we thought, well, we can make this 2 half hours. And then, but in order to do that, we had to do some pickups and extra scenes.
There was too much material to cut it back to a half hour. Obviously, it was way too good a story, and I think Doug just wrote more material to extend it to a 3-parter, which is what it became in the end.
Because we're going out, you know, doing things where no one really knows the true costing, because a lot of the time it's not been done or blah blah. So you get to, you know, halfway through the series, and the production manager and going, you need to save some money, you need to change one of the shows, make it cheaper, do this, blah blah blah.
It's not so much a headache for me, it's more for the actors putting their head back into where they came from, costume, makeup, design. Tough for them.
I think there comes a point where you realise that your job is to remember the lines and walk in at the right point, and that all the other, there was all these other discussions going on, which would have been with Ed and Doug, and, you know, just went, oh, how many episodes? 9? 9 out of 1. All right, I don't know. You know, you just go, I can't cope. 10. Let's do 15 episodes out of this one scene.
There was this one eye on, right, an hour and a half show is no bad thing in terms of the movie, because nearly all sitcom writers who do movies can't sustain the story arc over an hour and a half.
And you can put that episode together and it's a pretty good big old wallop, that one. If you just cut the week out in between, it's pretty good.
All the canaries will be dead within 1 hour, except for Rimmer.
Yes!
Who will be dead in 20 minutes.
Cassandra was one of my favourites out of Series 8 because it had Geraldine McEwen, who for me was just this. I mean, she's an amazing actress.
I mean, we had some great guest stars in this season. Just wonderful.
Geraldine McEwen, proper actress, coming in, getting covered in silver paint, stuck in a box. That was always the way. You'd see people that you'd watched and admired their performances for years. You'd seen them in long dresses, contemporary dress. You'd seen them doing proper acting. And then suddenly they turn up on Red Dwarf and they're usually either covered in wood glue and hung upside down, or they're stuck in a box with wires coming out their ears.
Makeup has given her this sort of spiky, icy, weird wig with, you know, sort of icicles and stuff on it. And we just literally gave her a collar that just accentuated so it was a sort of up and down thing, and it was made on the day.
I understand you have the ability to predict...
The future, yes, I do.
100% reliable?
Yes.
It was a very difficult timing, that one, because, you know, she's got to finish sentences that I'm starting and things like that. It's very difficult to get the timing right, because I remember it's not like down to the edit again anymore. It's done in front of a live audience again, you know.
It really showed you what great actors are all about, you know. I mean, she really had it. You could tell she had that quality.
And she remembered all her lines.
The boys were on such good behaviour. It's a proper actress. Oh, God, gotta be good. No dirty jokes. Funny, actually. No dirty jokes towards Geraldine McEwen, I notice. No talking about her knickers or bra. Just me.
Come on, no. Taking a bra off with me teeth age 181. That's a hell of a sexy way to go.
So long as the teeth are in your mouth at the time, sir.
It's such a fantastic little kind of mystery story as well as I mean, and it works itself out so well. It's almost like a Twilight Zone.
I think a lot of people thought it was going back to the original Red Dwarf style. It tells a great story, and it's obvious, you know, to the audience watching how the story, you know, how the story is put together.
I wasn't sure whether elements of it would work. You know, when you look at this conceptually, sometimes you look at a story and you go, is this going to make sense? Is this actually a story that, in the end, when you put it together, will flow and will make people engage? And it was. But it was a tough one, Cassandra.
That is Doug genius, you know, all that stuff about what she knows what's going to happen. And it does, but not in the way you expect. You know, it was just beautiful.
Another great story, kind of action-packed, sort of a... kind of start thinking, yourself, hey, I'm in the abyss here, you know, you're closing the hatches and there's water and you think, hey, I'm in the abyss here, okay. We weren't, though. You know, we were in some dodgy TV series on BBC Two, but you know what I mean, in your head.
The diving bell shot, I think there was originally discussions about seeing it entering the water, which is a pretty tough thing to do in CG. So I think in the end we limited it to a shot of it going down. That was quite unusual because I've been doing so many sort of space shots with stars, and finally I kind of got the chance to kind of do something which is kind of misty and grimy and kind of murky in the water. And I think even still we made it even more murky because I think we added some, I think it was almost like a snow effect on it from other stock footage, and actually made it look like there was additional plankton or other debris in the water.
Check us that harpoon gun, buddy.
What an awful costume to have to wear. Isn't it? Squeezed up like that, it makes my face look like I've got like 16 chins. And just another really uncomfortable costume in hot lights and all that.
Why would I want to sleep with you? I mean, it doesn't make sense.
Maybe you get blind drunk.
Well, it doesn't excuse my other 4 senses.
We had a great fun doing that scene. Great fun.
The Kochanski-Rimmer situation hadn't really been explored at all before this, and it was an interesting time to try it out. And it worked really well. And also, you know, as usual, Doug had put the two of them in the most seemingly insidious position. You mean you and me here giving it Riz, I do believe was the line.
Rimmer never actually gets that many scenes with Kochanski. He doesn't really get to interface with her that much.
We came on ready to do that scene. The audience were like, "Yay!" Because I came on with a blanket around me, and Rimmer was there keeping the bed warm for me, so it's kind of daunting.
So, in other words, if what's that for? You can't die. Yeah, but I still feel pain, you smegger.
This was another very enjoyable moment for me in this series, whereas I got to hit Craig with an axe.
Danny's never careful when it comes to hitting me, isn't it? Danny just gives me full throttle, mate. Pick up the pieces later on, isn't it? But then again, if I ever got to hit him, I'd do the same, so I can see where he's coming from. I don't hold it against him.
I think I've come up with something which means you can serve your entire 2-year sentence in just 14 weeks.
Oh, brilliant. What have I got to do?
Become a dog. It's a Holly joke. That's a typical Holly thing, isn't it? That would be.
My starring dog, he plays the Roverostomy man, and he took a fantastic shine to Chris Barry because Chris has got dogs of his own, and they really did set up a very nice friendship until Dylan got into the studio one day when they were filming Back in the Red Part 2, and Chris was about to get into his first clinch with Doc Newton, and Dylan appears at his groin waiting for a pat.
Let's go kill something!
Jake was fantastic. Absolutely loved what he did. Just came to the part, got the idea, and it was terrific.
In many ways, I suppose he could have been a sort of another regular character. Do you know what I mean? When you look back on the history of Red Dwarf, he was just had that incredible energy about him that was excellent.
Jake was fantastic. He had that insane look on his face, which was horribly real.
I liked him, nice bloke. And also another fellow comedian was in, the big guy, Ricky Grover. Yeah, with Ricky Grover, what did I do? We made a... Yeah, I mean, we had lots of time on our hands. There should be a little football pitch at Shepperton, actually. I'm surprised there's not little teams. Perhaps there are probably table tennis teams or something, I don't know. Or shove halfpenny is my game. We made planes and see who could throw it the furthest. And I got this magazine, a men's magazine. I'd found it, and it showed you how to make a really good plane that would travel a really long way out of paper. And I sent it to Ricky, I got his address, sent it to him. But also, when I cut it out of the page, there was another question. It was how to have successful intercourse. And his wife had seen this and wondered why I'd sent it to him. And he wasn't very happy about that, I remember.
With the new characters then on Red Dwarf, it was who do we need to tell the stories? We needed the sadistic warden, obviously, and... in a way, they're kind of familiar archetypes from prison movies. You know, the psychotic lunatic and you know, kill crazy, and it's a real sort of tribute to Doug that he took these kind of archetypes and made them, with the help of the actors, into really, really interesting characters.
And we had some mad, ugly people in those prisoners.
There's an agency called Uglies, isn't there? And they all came from Uglies. Imagine putting yourself down for that agency, you know. Imagine having that kind of self-esteem. Look, I know I look like shit. If I'm going to work, I'm going to have to go to Uglies.
There were some very heavily pierced people there, and some people with extreme haircuts, extreme body-piercing, tattooing, shavings, really. You know, I mean, I do consider myself a liberal that thinks that all people have the right to pierce themselves, but, you know, there's got to be limits, for goodness sake.
It became an ongoing quest to find the most tattooed, the most studied, the most pierced, the most ridiculous but bizarre-looking character. Because at the end of the day, they're in a boiler suit, and what do you see? A head and hands. It was just to give them a uniform look, that they were somewhere where, you know, that was it. They were just part of this melee of people. Very much based on American style, death row, you know, you take away your identity, you're all sort of either... I mean, they all had barcode cuffs that had a particular note, which you'd never see in a million years, but, you know, we transferred barcodes on all of them.
Yeah, I didn't mind the jumpsuits, but then we become canaries and we're in PVC and rubber, and then all the bad memories come flooding back.
I mean, the layers upon layers of clothing, the canary outfits. You wear you get your underbit, you get your trousers coming up here, your thing, and then the rucksack. And the rucksack was the most exciting, because all the boys could stash their fags in the back, and, you know, mobile phones, you know, tampons, whatever.
Basically, we did all look like budgies.
I needed to have something that was, you know, believable as they go out on missions. If they were going out in space, that they were kitted up, that they carry X, Y, and Z. I wanted it to look stylish.
We were on location filming at the old Guardian Press building, and there was a sequence where 5 canaries come in and they're backlit, and you see their shadows come in, and they've got their guns and they're coming along like this. And one of them didn't turn up, so I think the first assistant said to me, "Come on, Joe, you'll have to do it." And I was like, "Oh, goody, I get to wear one of the canary outfits." And I didn't tell anybody I was doing it, so I turned up on set and did my bit. And then I walked over to the monitor to have a look. And it's not a very welcome thing for supporting artists to do that. And so you could see Doug and Ed sort of looking around thinking, what's she doing? What's she doing? And eventually I kind of engaged Doug in eye contact, and he was like, "Oh!"
Good evening. Tonight's scheduled feature has been cancelled and replaced by a special live pay-per-view event brought to you courtesy of Karate TV.
Great episode, great writing. It's like the old days again. It's like one of those half-hour stories. He managed to get this one in at half an hour.
And it was just one of those episodes where everyone seemed to be working together well, and the chemistry was terrific.
And the way it originally evolved was it was a very, very Crichton-centric episode, and it was him learning the error of his ways of being Del Boy and all that kind of thing.
To use that environment of the prison and the sort of scam, that suddenly the least likely character to survive and do well and work out how to work the system was Crichton's.
It was a side of Crichton that I don't frankly like, but it was a side of Crichton that was cashing in on me and the other girls in the wing, and I think he was rebelling against the fact that he'd been classed as a woman for so long.
Everyone who read it, I think, said, "Well, okay, great, but where's Lister and Rimmer?" So that was when sort of Doug came in, and so all of the stuff about the appeal and with all the result of the 17th or 18th draft.
Sorry to keep droning on about this, but what about the appeal?
And we all talked about, sort of Ed and me and Doug, about the idea of the Jeremy Beadle type shows. And so what we were doing, I guess, was extrapolating the trend of the Jeremy Beadle programmes and docusoaps that were around at the time into what became Big Brother, and I mean, which now is about, are they going to get their kit off in the shower? So I think it was quite prescient in that sense.
We bring you live and lithe Women's Shower Night.
I swear I'd seen Grips and Sparks and other members of the crew that I had never seen before. You know, are you actually on this shoot? Who are you? You know, and they were all crammed in there into the shower. So no, I'm just because the lighting's not right. I just need another. You know,
we shot that sequence in a rugby club, and the rugby club smelt of rugby players. It was kind of rank, you know? And so on one side you've got this kind of rank rugby club going on, and girls being showered over there. It was a bit like going into a shop that sells guns and musical instruments.
The weirdness of that mask is that it completely neuters you, and you just stand there and there's like nothing going on. I had my umbrella in my book. I didn't act at all, I was just standing there. This is what I really feel like. Look, she's beautiful. She's got nothing on, she's all wet. And I think it's the perfect punishment for sexual offenders. You just stick that head on them and then let them out in the community. They won't do anything. And you'd know. You'd be able to tell. Bloke with the orange pointy head. Don't stand too near him. He's a bit of a weirdo.
Good evening. Sorry?
The black and white B movie. I did get called on that one day by Mel, and he said, "Can you build as a flying saucer?" Oh. And he said, "You've got 2.5 hours." So the flying saucer that you see in the B movie is mine.
Embarrassing moment, we were filming a flying saucer, which was about this big, spinning around off a piece of fishing wire with lights going off it, and the Star Wars production team came past, followed by the Star Wars special effects group, who were all looking at us with our little with our little bit of string and our little thing. We were going, "No, we meant to make it naff. We don't want it to look good."
Unfortunately, I wasn't able to come to the studio recordings for Crikey TV, and they had to do my bit separately, which is a shame because I was ill with a kidney infection, which is a bit of a bummer.
It was actually very good, very brave of her to do as much as she could, you know, but it was one of those ones where she had to leave.
So I was sitting at home in bed and I was feeling, Friday night, this is the night I should be doing that, and I felt a bit cheated not being involved in that.
So she wasn't there. So we then had to shoot. God, I got completely confused about what was going on, but we had to shoot bits with her later on, even though she was meant to be there. So there's probably sequences within that where I'm talking to Kachansky, and I was actually talking to someone was holding a stick.
I've been so completely slandered throughout the whole episode anyway, so I felt so used.
There was a moment in the space shuttle, I think it is, that's going off from Red Dwarf with the canaries in it, and as he's describing this, we cut wide, and all the men in the shuttle cross their legs at the same time.
We're not frozen in time, Critey. We were just thinking about what you were saying.
And that got such a big laugh on the night that we don't often do this, we actually had to shorten the laugh and make it shorter, because it went on and on and on and on and on.
I can't believe you don't know. No what? No one told you. Told me what?
You mean to say you're standing there blissfully unaware of the news about Miss Kachansky and her ex-boyfriend Tim?
What news about Miss Kachansky and her ex-boyfriend Tim?
I don't believe it.
Believe what?
I'm so traumatized no one's had the guts to tell you the horrible, terrible, appallingly hideous, awful news.
The basic first joke sequence was, have you heard the news about Miss Kachansky? What news about Miss Kachansky? You mean to tell me you haven't heard the news? And that went on endlessly in a series of repetitions. Robert couldn't quite remember the repetitions. And so I said, look, just improvise it. You know where you've got to go.
Don't be absolutely rigid on it. These are the points you've got to get across. I'll put enough cameras on it so that we can cut it down if it goes wrong. Just have a go at it.
That was very unusual for Red Dwarf, where effectively we just ad-libbed it.
I have a date with Miss Patricia Carling from Supplies on Saturday night. She thinks my eyes are my loveliest feature. If I go like this, I'm only half lovely!
Well, Graham McTavish as Ackerman, I mean, that to me was just one of my abiding memories of the whole series.
In real life, extremely charming, but yeah, when he did the sort of walkie up to you and do the pointy aggression thing, I was quite frightened. I'm very sensitive.
You spoke again.
He's one of those guys who's got that facility to be mean, unpleasant, angry, as an actor, not as a person, and pull it off really well and be funny. That's the good thing. And he's completely understands about a man a pompous, arrogant man in high authority who gets totally humiliated. He completely understands how to play that, and he can do it really well.
The slightly mincy touch of the camp, you know, fair game. That wasn't written that way, but it gave a kind of extraordinary edge to it, which was probably maybe even scarier than just the straight, you know, psycho.
I mean, he was menacing, but there was this kind of underlying, really comic kind of thing, and especially in that episode where you found out that you know, he had the hots for this woman, and he wanted to look his best and be his best, and so his way of doing that was to be a total sadistic bastard to the prisoners and get his eye back, so he could go on a smoochy date with his beloved. I mean, I think that tells you all you need to know about the character. That's encompassing both sides of the character.
It was one of the scenes I remember clearly when I was reading it. I was reading it on the tube and laughing out loud at that somebody stole his eye. I mean, it's just ridiculous.
You wanted to do a whole show about him, really, ultimately, because he just brought this fear, this frustration, this anger, this disappointment about his whole life that I thought was just tremendous.
I think he's a man who enjoys the company of women, or, at a push, men dressed as women. Dad, who was a traffic warden, mother, maybe works for the Inland Revenue. The kind of man that sees pain as an essential part of any career path. A lot of uniforms, a lot of admiring Dad in the uniform, a lot of maybe dressing up like my dad, maybe dressing up like my mum. He has a vivarium, I think, a lot of snakes in his life. Likes looking at things that are sort of cold and reptilian. He's not hurting anybody, well, not much. And one that I never actually discussed with them, but I would have loved to have shown how big my arsenal is in outer space. It's the big, did you know, he has the biggest arsenal in outer space. Very, very extensive. Lots of crossbows. It's nice. I'll show it to you.
They do a series of things to really irritate Hollister, which build and get more and more cataclysmic. So in that sense, it was a series of set pieces, but it was deliberately like that, building to, you know, the end.
What Doug said to me anyway was that he thought of Hollister as being a kind of Colonel Hall to this double Bilko of Lister and Rimmer, whereas I thought more of him as like Lieutenant Johnson and Cagney and Lacey.
Me and Chris became sort of partners in crime, sort of Laurel and Hardy, and kind of bungling everything, but like trying to get one over on Captain Hollister, you know.
Permission to snigger, sir. Permission refused. May have to snigger anyway, sir.
In that sort of situation, it's usually, you know, they can come together and do that, but there'll always be a little twist at the end where one of them tries to stuff the other.
Well, I'll tell you what was really hard for me, and that was, you know, the speech is about, do you know what it's like?
When a dinosaur eats cow vindaloo, 2.5 tons of mint chalk ice cream, followed by 400 crates of orange ice pops. And
there was about 4 big speeches, and they were all very similar. And we ended up shooting them last, and I was tired at the end of this thing. I was just really brain dead. And I had to do those speeches. And if you look really, really carefully at the finished product, you can see little minute hesitations.
It was a progressive shoot, so you do a bit, stop, do something to him, do a bit, stop, do something, and do a bit, no, do a bit.
You know, very simple process, but again, a way of doing it as cheaply as possible without very, you know, load of sort of CGI effects. I mean, it was a case of just hack it off with a pair of scissors.
We had to pre-record that for obvious reasons. We couldn't do that in front of the audience.
Although you'd be surprised at just how much a TV crew can expand when they realise that 2 of the cast, even us, are going to be naked.
Because I wasn't in the scene, but I remember being at the side. I can just remember being at the side when they were filming that, so that they were waiting before they went on.
But listen, I thought if those 2 had been kissing, you know, what can you do next? They kiss in the first one, they've got to go naked in the next, haven't they?
It was tongues last time.
Well, I mean, neither of those guys has anything to be ashamed of. I could tell you that. They have nothing to be ashamed of.
I seem to remember there was a bit of a debate as to sort of how naked we were going to be, but I think we were pretty damn naked when it came to it, you know, with having to cup our privates with our hands.
Chris, if you're watching this, nothing to be ashamed of.
At one stage, I thought they were going to say, you've got to shave it up. Isn't it? Do you think I'm an Italian footballer?
It's so well shot, isn't it? I mean, it's just amazing.
I think they have trampolines and things like that to dive over things. Looking at the screen, though, Chris's work was brilliant. Chris flew at one stage.
It's a really funny sequence. And doing it in Hollis's office is great. When they're trying to be on their best behaviour and suddenly they're flying about breaking all the furniture. That was fun because we started doing location filming before we actually went into the studio. So I think we had a couple of weeks on location in different places.
It was done at the old Guardian Press building up in the city, and it was a huge space that we had that we could use, which is actually where the dinosaur egg was hatched as well.
The scene was one of those things that when you shoot it, it becomes more of a, you know, let's just have some fun with the basketball, really.
We tried to shoot it with just shooting around and seeing what we could get. And in the end, it became clear to me that you can't do it with something as large as a basketball game. You have to set up certain gags, shoot them, and get on with it.
Harlem Globetrotters. You just take your whole, you know, big baggy shorts. It's got all that with it. And, you know, the guards, it was literally a colour. You just retain that sort of black and red, slightly sinister. We made their shorts skimpier and tighter.
I wish they'd chosen hockey because I was really good at hockey. I really sucked at netball, basketball. See, netball, private school. What can I tell you?
I don't know anything. I'm not sporty, you know. I don't know anything to do with people running around with the ball. Is a mystery to me, whether they're holding it or kicking it. But so I had to, you know, pretend I knew how to play. What were we playing? Basketball, I suppose. That was the. But then you look with Dan and Craig, and they can actually do it.
Craig was very good, actually. Good basketball player. I was surprised. In fact, he did a shot that was truly amazing from like three-quarter court, one of those ones, and it just went swish.
And aren't I the basketball diva?
Craig excelled himself, of course. Danny was very, very balletic. Crichton, Roberts just went, oh, God.
And Dan was doing slam dunks. You know, God. I knew what a slam dunk was. I didn't before, but I learned then. He explained it to me.
You've got some very competitive people in this show, so you can imagine, you know, when we had anything that had two sides, it got very competitive.
People just forgot. There was no acting. They wanted to get that ball through the hoop.
Oh, yeah, they were well into it. I mean, it was like, forget the camera, forget the script. Let's play a real game.
I had my own back when all the boys had to be bent double with their erections, and that was my own back for Christ TV, I think. They must have felt so stupid. It was so great.
It was very hard for the actors to pretend that they had to play basketball with erections. But again, you've got Ackerman, you've got no worries.
Having to be bent double, leaning forward with your arse sticking out and clutching your groin for hours, actually. Hours and hours. It was pretty difficult.
I thought Hollister should have been really proud of his. Kind of walked around and, yeah.
I think Pete probably was the most ambitious script of all of them. Certainly it has every element in it that you could ever imagine shooting in an episode of Red Dwarf.
From probably even before I came on board to do the 8th series, they wanted to do a dinosaur, because I think Chris had said, you know, Chris Veal had said there is dinosaur software available. So they were going, how can we bring in a dinosaur into the episode?
The episode expanded, and we needed to get our money's worth out of the dinosaur, because we had a dinosaur. Chris had created the dinosaur in the computer, and people just felt, well, it's a shame not to see more of the dinosaur, and for that would mean a second episode, and we'd run out of money anyway, so that was the way we went.
Doug was under lots of pressure to cut the budget, and he had this idea for this mega expensive. Not that a dinosaur episode isn't mega expensive, and he had this idea for this other mega expensive episode at the end of the series where they return to Earth, and it turned out that that basically there was no money to do that episode, and so he originally intended the sort of the finale of the series to be a two-parter, the second half of which would be they return to Earth. And so what he had to do was, because he already had his expensive dinosaur episode, was make that into the two-parter. So kind of spread the money to 2 episodes.
We'd be doing episodes like, and then it'd be, all right, let's do the scene from Pete, and then get the boxes in. All right, all you got to do is look up there. That was it.
I don't think it was too much of a stretch to actually turn it into a two-parter. It wasn't like we were writing acres and acres of padding. There was loads there already.
I would stand behind the barrels and go, why? What, where are the barrels? Bobby, you remember when we were in the big aircraft hangar thing? Yeah, and there were the barrels. Yeah. Well, you're standing behind them there. Oh, what are we doing that bit where the dinosaurs? Yeah, I like to. Chris would explain it. Bobby, it's quite simple. I'll explain what's going on. We're doing an episode of a series called Red Dwarf. This is true. This is what I know that, Chris. I know it's Red Dwarf, but why is the dinosaur here? If you'd read the script, Bob, let me show you.
A 7-ton theropod is not going to eat Indian food. An Indian restaurant may be, but not Indian food. A 7-ton theropod is not going to eat Indian food. An Indian waiter, no problem. Indian food, forget it.
Don't put that stuff in, you're going to spoil the taste.
And the hardest thing was finding a location that was tall enough. I think we needed to find somewhere that had a 50-foot height so that the T-Rex would be the right size inside it. And so we ended up going to this god-awful place called Cardington.
Which is so big, it gets its own clouds in it. Has its own weather system. This place is so bloody big.
And it has loads of loose bits of corrugated iron. But the noise in this place, so when it was blindy, it was all this stuff blowing around. How on earth we got anything shot in there? I don't know.
I've never been in such a big building. I mean, the building it was filmed in, it used to house Zeppelins in or something like that.
It's an airship garage. Park the airship, love, in the garage, on the one on the left, because there's some stuff in the one on the right.
I'm at the top of a gantry, which is rusting a little bit, and we're hanging on there, and it's hundreds of feet to the floor. Got the widest angle lens on, taking the widest angle we can look at, and Chris Field's going, I don't think there's enough headroom.
You need somewhere, where a camera can kind of get up fairly high, and somewhere with a good space for the dinosaur to run around in.
Considering the budget that they had, the dinosaur's fantastic. I mean, and what other sitcom budget would you get a dinosaur rampaging through?
To visualise it, I actually bought up a lot of transparent printouts of renders of the dinosaur, and we were able to lay that on top of the monitor and get an idea of camera angles, eye lines, and the such.
You haven't got a live dinosaur there or anything like that, so you're playing to like, and you've got some guy with a stick, with a stick saying, there's your eye line, there's your eye line.
And our eye line is the green bit of tape, love.
Oh, is it? For God's sake, I was looking at the bloody balloon. What am I on? What bloody planet am I on?
I mean, I felt like Fay Ray out of King Kong. There's an awful lot of bending up like this, pretending to see the T-Rex, and lots of... It was very, very, very Fay Ray.
Trying to look scared or, of a guy with a stick, well, you would if it was Jackie Chan.
The head of the dinosaur had been built for another production. It was only the foot that was built specifically for Red Dwarf.
I wanted the leg actually to put in the garden afterwards, but I wasn't allowed to have it.
If I shut up, now stop hitting me! That is definitely the key.
I got to a good thrashing from Mr. Ackerman.
He had to be quite padded up for that, because I went for it. I went for it in a big way.
I was a bit worried. Had a bit of a, wouldn't say delighted look on his face, but not one of your normal faces when you're beating someone up.
But it was a bit cramped, so I couldn't get a good, that was the only annoying thing. You need a good swing.
We want a Barney with Barney. Don't want any sane people spoiling it.
Yeah, Ricky Grove, who played Baxter. We blew it lots of times when we were doing scenes with him because he didn't even have to say anything. We were all laughing. So Kill Crazy would go, little dinosaur, and he'd go, yeah. And he's got this big face, he's huge. Ex-boxer and hairdresser. What a background. And he's such a, big, heavy man, and yet he runs like a tank. I mean, he's like terrifying when he runs towards you. Because there was a sequence where he had to steal the time wand from me, and you kind of, I had to go, hold it like that, and then he would run. It was that embarrassing thing where you'd be holding it, like, pretending that he wasn't going to grab it, but it was literally, bang! This thing just was shot out of my hand as he legged it past. Grabbed it off me, hey, time wand, yeah. Yeah, the Scutters were always had a lot of emotional problems, and Bob and Madge, it wasn't easy for them. And they were heavily, in their earlier forms, heavily affected by taxis. In fact, by anything. I think if you had a watch near them, they'd go wrong. But by season 8, they were better.
I was first asked to work on the Scutters. That was the request up front. They said the BBC are not involved this time, so there are no plans, no drawings, nothing. Here are some episodes, see what you can glean from those.
And I hadn't ever seen a Scutter before, so I didn't really know what it did. And the special effects guys took me out to the car park and gave me the remote control and said, OK, you operate it. I didn't know what I was doing. I couldn't make it go forwards or backwards. It did backflips, but I couldn't make it do anything else.
We hoped that we could bring them alive a bit more. As you say, the technology's there now, and it's got much cheaper, which is always the byline for Red Dwarf.
They might have been a little bit more reliable. They might have been quieter in operation. And their control boxes might have been slightly more 90s than 80s.
Well, because we didn't know how the BBC had made them, that was a trade secret, I went in quite blind on it. My colleague had resprayed a Scutter about 6 months previous, and he had resprayed it in the summer outside his workshop. So I went round to his workshop with a sheet of tracing paper and traced the outline of the Scutter, and that's how I knew the dimensions.
What is it? I think it's Archie, sir.
One of the confusing things was that the bits we shot for one episode would end up in an extended version of another one. So Archie the Penis was originally in Cassandra, one of the early parts of Cassandra, and that was then chopped out and used in Pete 2.
It worked better with everything else that was going on around in that episode. We didn't want to, potentially have to cut Archie and chuck him away.
Archie had a lot of trouble running around the cell the first time. He got stuck. His string got caught.
You know those kind of little rabbits that go around with the greyhounds chase? Well, imagine that, only with a firecracker up the rabbit's butt.
It was like a furry caterpillar, just sort of being pulled along until you realise that actually it's supposed to be his penis.
I've tried to make one at home, and it really didn't work.
But it was quite nice, too, because this is actually Crichton and Kochanski trying to get together, trying to become friends. And him being very, very vulnerable, him trying not to be classed as a woman anymore. He's got this penis. It's all over the place. It ends up Cat's sweater.
It was a good take on the whole alien thing. There was a lot of sort of raised eyebrows when that part came up. Huh?
Crichton, do you realise what this means?
No, ma'am.
It means you're a real man.
It does? Why?
Because now, like all men, you have absolutely no control over your penis.
What a line. My favourite line in the whole of Red Dwarf.
Every dog has his day. And today's the day. And I'm the dog.
The whole thrust of the thing is kind of Rimmer's ambition sort of sorted in one fell swoop, really.
I'm probably the only person I know that looks good jaundiced. I mean, that was wonderful because a lot of it was spent lying in bed, which is one of my favorite things to do in life. If you get to choose ever how you're going to do a scene, always choose lying down. And also, lying down in bed with a very beautiful, gorgeous body, just, feet away, is not a bad way to go. And also Heidi was there as well.
Beautiful girl. It was to have something that, had the idea of someone who was spiritual in the future and then how obviously had this other side. So it was a case of take something that was just very, you know, tunic based and very sort of simple, like Sackcloth and Ashes, but you know, in the future.
Alert, alert, a chalky nut bar. A chalky nut bar has been removed without payment. A chalky nut bar has been removed without payment. Alert, alert, shut up! No, shout! Alert, alert!
I think that's one of Doug's specialities, you know, writing, you know, voices for relatively inanimate objects, talking to actors.
Take your hand off my speaker then.
Promise to shut up?
Promise. I have my circuits crossed. Alert, alert!
The fact that, you know, me arguing with a vending machine turning out to be quite amusing was all down to Mr. Slattery's brilliant training as a man who can voice just about anything.
Tony Slattery I've got a lot of time for. I think he's very talented guy.
Such a nice bloke. I did a weakest link with him, celebrity weakest link. I came third, he won. Him and Vanessa Feltz ganged up on me at the end. They were in the footlights together, Cambridge footlights. And I'm a comprehensive kid. And I was the strongest link in nearly all the rounds. And then the old school tie came out right at the end and they voted me off.
Mel Bibby came into my workshop one day and said, "Do you have anything that looks like an orange escape pod round here?" And he said, there's no money as usual. So I felt very guilty about the whole thing and said, look, I'll help you out. I'll design something, I'll build it. How long have I got? He said 3 days. I said, okay, we'll go with that. But for my services, you can buy me a bottle of red wine. I'll do it for a bottle of red wine. And Mel stood there and thought for a few minutes, and he said, now, is that a £5 bottle or a £15 bottle of red wine? I completed the model in the given time, and Mel, bless him, bless you, Mel, he gave me 2 boxes, not supermarket boxes, 2 crates of red wine, 2 cases.
Actually, I felt terribly sorry for Doug because a lot of the time during the lunch break, when everybody else would be having a proper break, Doug would be over in the edit suite looking at either the previous day's footage or, you know, the first cut together of whatever episode we'd just done. So he didn't ever really get a lunch break, and the poor man was, you know, rung over and said, come on, we're back on set, you need to get back over, and he rushed over there in his car.
Got in the car, bent in reverse, mistimed it, terrible crunchy noise. It's like, oh, God, what's that? Look round, and it's Craig's Rolls Royce. My car's just so mangled and exhaust is hanging off, and his Rolls Royce was absolutely pristine. I promise you, not a scratch.
But Doug's bumper had come off and a headlight had been smashed, and the special effects boys came along, jacked the car up, fitted the bumper back on, and it was all done and dusted within a couple of hours. But I don't think Doug told Craig until maybe the end of the shoot.
And I thought it's probably not a brilliantly smart idea to go, Craig, don't worry about it, mate. I know you're about to do this scene. Bit of a crash, Rolls Royce. But honestly, no damage to your Rolls Royce at all. I didn't think his mind would be on it. So I waited, I think it was about 3 months before I told him, which was at the wrap party after I'd very carefully monitored the fact that he had had 6 whiskey and lemonades.
Or perhaps he's never told you about it.
Really? Was this my Rolls?
Yeah.
Why? Did he hit my Rolls?
He apparently drove into the back of it. It's
Did
in
he?
the script book. I'm not, you know, revealing trade secrets.
No. So he drove into the back of my Rolls. He never told me. He never told me, isn't it? Well, isn't it? There's always other Rollses.
Only from the pen of Doug Naylor. Outstanding.
A little present, ma'am.
No, Crichton. No.
He set me up, didn't he? This is absolutely not what you're supposed to do when a woman is having a...
He'd done a completely reasonable and good thing. You know, it wasn't bad. He wasn't trying to be nasty. He was trying to be really good. And it sort of slightly backfired.
She's essentially incredibly puritanical. I mean, this is her biggest nightmare. I mean, she's not out there, you know, for people to know, to sit there and talk about. She's not laddish in that way at all. It's her. I mean, it's awful. I mean, it's like Series 7 watching her knickers spin dry in duck soup. This is her night. No, no. Crichton, please. Nobody must know about this. I'm a navigation officer. I don't care. Let away.
I'm of the generation that grew up with the sort of burst of feminism, where, you know, and it was demanded of my generation of men to kind of take on board a lot of women's issues. So I felt really at home there. I have a happy period. I wish I'd done that in 1974. Oh, no, I mean it.
There's one of those scenes where you go, I have no problems with this at all. I just absolutely know it's going to fly, this scene. In terms of an audience scene, you know, as a sort of pure comedy scene, but also very clever because it's using Crichton's naivety.
That set was behind another one, so they couldn't actually see it in real life. They could only see it on the monitors. So there's that wonderful moment. There's that thing where, yes, this is going to work, you know, beforehand. And we just stood there. I stood there till my arm ached while they were this huge laugh. Women screaming,
You're drunk. Drunk, sir?
No, sir. Absolutely not, sir. No, no, no.
Who fancies a kebab?
Oh, yeah.
That was done live, and I'd never done live television before. It's this sort of weird combination of theatre and television, and you feel like you're in a theatre. Well, you are in a theatre, but you think, oh, right, I should be playing to the audience that are... But actually, you have to remain playing to the camera. But waiting in the green room, my God, it was so... Yeah, it was nerve-wracking.
I remember the drunk scene. I always remember drunk scenes because being drunk is actually one of the hardest things to do.
I just did an impression of my brother-in-law, Pat. He's like that when he's drunk.
What in the hell are you doing, Shirley? I'm stealing your fries, fat boy.
I think I ate about 15 school dinners that day. So I should be getting kidney failure in about 10 minutes.
Danny in a dress. Funny you should say that. Didn't get any reaction from the downstairs department seeing Danny in a dress.
It wasn't until I actually saw it back and I thought, gee, I look like my mum.
I think Danny secretly likes to wear dresses. And actually, he looks very good in them.
Good calves, though. Good calves.
But completely in character. You don't feel that he's doing it because he likes it. You do feel that he's actually doing it to escape. And, well, I hope you are.
There was the device to create the mirror universe. No design for it as such. So I thought it would be quite cool if it was built round a can of leopard lager. So I got one of those from Props. It was empty, of course, so I didn't even get a drink out of it this time.
I just remember all of that mirror sequence, being an absolute, trial to get through. That sort of reminded me of the series 5-6 days, just the sort of complication and the hanging around and all that sort of stuff that we had to do for that. But, worth it in the end.
At one point it got very confusing because we took a break and I found that I could play the violin left-handed, which was amazing because I had never been able to play the violin at all before that.
Somebody call. I like playing that part, and I always like playing alternative cats for some reason because I always my thing was to always make sure that people still saw him as the cat.
The Professor was very, had elements of Dwayne Dibley about it. Put Danny in a pair of teeth and a bald wig, and it's a good characterization. So you just take that whole moth-eaten Professor look, and Kochanski was the archetypal blonde bimbo.
You'll need to ask the Professor then. He does all that stupid sciencey brain box type stuff.
Yeah, it's kind of stereotypical, big blonde and fluffy hairdo, wasn't it? Lots of fuchsia lipstick. But what you didn't see was the bottom half, which was a really tight miniskirt and fishnets and again, one for the boys, you know.
Cesium francholithic mixyalbidium rixy dixy doxy dexy droxide.
There was a test tube mistake, and where it should have changed colour from one side of the universe to the other, it didn't.
The test tubes were wrong. There was white in the wrong test tube, something like that. And in fact, she was slightly different the first time.
No, you don't want me. You want the professor. He does all those sciencey brain box type stuff.
It was rewritten, completely rewritten. And I remember Doug shoving this thing under my nose just before we did it. And I wasn't very good at sight reading. I was trying like that, but it was fun. It was nice for me to do something completely different.
By the end of Series 8, the running sub-commentary behind the scenes was how sometimes certain members of the cast had difficulty memorising certain things, and that I think Doug just had a laugh. That's when he said, right, I'll give them something they won't be able to remember.
They gave me a very long, made-up medical word that ended in oxide.
Cesium francholithic something or others.
I'm not even going to try and remember how to say it.
Cesium, oh no, sorry. No, it was just...
It ended with Rixie, Dexy, Doxy, Dexy, Hoxy, Hexydroxide, or something.
Doug didn't think it was sayable anyway, and he wrote it. So he basically said, oh, you know, just make something up, Dan, you know. Just say anything. So I actually went away and learnt it.
Cesium francholithic mixyalbidium rixy dixy doxy dexy droxide.
He was remarkably good at it. And he could say it really fast as well.
But the fact that I learnt it meant that Rimmer and Lister had to repeat it. And I think everybody had to repeat it.
Cesium francholithic mixyalbidium rixy dixy doxy dexy droxide. Yes!
Oh, cesium francholithic mixyalbidium rixy dixy doxy dexydroxide.
Was that not used then? Because I remember having to bloody learn it.
Cesium francholithic mixyalbidium rixy dixy doxy dexydroxide.
Because obviously by then, now Doug's got that look in his eye, well, if Dan can do it, you can.
Cesium francholithic mixyalbidium rixy dixy doxy dexydroxide.
I do remember having to learn that, and it was one of those situations where I think I did kind of get it on the day.
Cesium francholithic mixy...
We all had to learn it. We were all, even Craig was having trouble. We all had to walk around and we were arguing. No, it's Rixy, Dexy, Dixy, Hexydroxide. No, Dexyhoxide. No.
Yeah, it's daunting, but hey, we've had 8 seasons of learning practice.
I, of course, kept my usual standard. And Chris was good at it as well, I think. I don't know, you probably got loads of outtakes now of us all being really, really crap. Cesium francholithic mixyalbidium rixy dixy doxy dexydroxide. Not to be confused with cesium francholithic...
Cesium francholithic mixyalbidium rixy... Oh, shit. I'm so sorry, guys. No, it's shite.
Cesium francholithic mixyal...
And what happened?
They didn't use it.
The first ending, I think we were concerned that there was no cliffhanger. And you're always slightly concerned if you leave it completely closed that you won't get another series. There were several endings, and I think the ending that was replaced was the second ending and not the first ending. And it was the second ending that truly didn't work. The first ending could well have done, but for some reason we went past that and ended up with a second ending, which was then replaced by the third ending.
They changed the ending from this conga line to having Rimmer with the Grim Reaper, which is a kind of a dark end to it.
Your life is over. Come with me.
That's the tightest we've ever done to thinking of something and shooting it.
As far as I was concerned, Red Dwarf was kind of in the can, and then someone, you know, I rang up for some reason, Grant Naylor, and they said, oh yeah, Doug's in today, he's reshooting the end of Only the Good, and it's like, what? And I was already halfway through a completely different series.
They had a day's schedule, I think, for this reshoot, and literally ran around the departments at Shepperton and borrowed a pair of sandals and some old robe. I think it was The Mummy they were filming, and just went into the wardrobe and said, look, my God, I've got to make a death costume. Can I borrow this?
We actually used a workshop at Shepperton. They didn't have any studios available, so we used this rather strange little workshop. And Ed, bless him, played Death very nicely.
We will travel to the Red Sticks.
And I was kicked in the bollocks by Chris.
That's never happened before.
I was top stunt guy that day. I was rubbish at directing, but boy, was I good at stunts.
I mean, the whole concept of kicking Death in the Ghoulies is well worth, you know, having as an ending, because it's just it's funny. Every ending, I think, provides its own set of possibilities for the return. So, no, I think the punchier ending was the best one.
I don't consider the series done with, no. It's just which way we go. As everyone knows, it's been I've been trying to get the money for the movie, which I may or may not do. We always seem to be 2 weeks away. There always seems to be someone going, I'll definitely give you the money, or a bit of the money, or 25% of the money, and then they don't. And I'm desperate to do the movie. I would, at some point though, there will be where it'll occur, even to me, that these people are all lying scumbags, and it's time either to do something completely different, or to do some special Red Dwarf specials or a Red Dwarf series. And I think we're pretty close to having to make a decision one way or the other, quite honestly. But what that is yet, I truly don't know.